one of the things I guess is that there's always opportunities for improvement. Whether that improvement is reflected in the safety of the product, the quality of it, the cost, or the productivity of the process, which yields you a better delivery. And that's regardless of whether that's a manufacturing process or a sales process. The system, as it's presented, has an application in every single thing that we do. If we bring a team together with a clear understanding of what the current state is, how things are today, and we ask questions about the process, we're able to identify those opportunities and employ countermeasures that can improve the process near term, short term, midterm, long term. And when you begin to visualize, and that's a lot of what the Toyota production system wants you to do, is visualize the process and share with all the stakeholders the things that have been found so that everybody can participate in creating those countermeasures.
Today on the podcast, we have Tim Jenkins. He is the new plant manager of our Louisville, Mississippi plant. And he is actually a UGA fan as well. And I'm representing Auburn today. He was representing UGA when he was in from Louisville at our Topeka location last week. And so that's been some fun banter. I even looked up a joke for this, Tim. So what?
You just kept bringing up Auburn football, right?
I didn't want to go there because sadly our program is definitely a joke at the moment. I actually saw how much I thought recruiting was our strength, and I saw how poorly we're doing in that right now recently, which was a surprise to me. But no, my joke is much worse than that. Actually, it's where did the UGA grad sleep when his wife was angry at him?
I don't know the answer.
In the doghouse.
Well, that qualifies for a dad joke.
Yeah, bad dad joke. We'll put it in that category. So Tim, thanks for joining us. Our audience is buyers, engineers, product managers, people that work with Polo as customers, and hopefully future customers as well that find us through our different digital marketing efforts, including this. So appreciate you being a guest on the podcast today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your manufacturing background before you came to Polo Custom Products?
Yeah, so I've been involved in several different industries over the years, starting in yarn, going into carpet, to making clay bricks, to drills and drill bits, building bucket trucks up in South Dakota, big weld shop there. My first stint in Mississippi was building caskets at Batesville, Mississippi, at Batesville Casket Company. From there, I got into my second cut and sew operation, which was in safety vests over in North Carolina. I've made earplugs, electrical grid connectors, and now I'm at Polo Custom Products. So I've spent several years in different lean manufacturing roles. Been exposed to a lot of different training, as well as providing training for different teams, not just within the United States, but all over the world. And so I've had a lot of great opportunities to visit, lead teams in different projects, everything from fairly small localized projects to projects where, kind of the question was, how do we design a plant to be lean from the ground up? What are the things that have to be incorporated into that? And that was a plant going into Sao Paulo, Brazil. So how do you put in the infrastructure for whether it's air, power, machines, all your ancillary equipment? How do you build that from the ground up, being a very lean system? So it was a different, where in most companies, you're trying to incorporate lean, in a process that's already, the plant's built, it's in operation. So that was real fun project. The other thing I would share, is, I love history. I've kind of grown to be a little bit of a history buff. And, the strong U.S. manufacturing is intertwined throughout history. I mean, you see it, I watch the History Channel a lot, and you see it all the time, the industrial age, things of that nature, and again, I do a lot of World War II things. And besides, the folks that were serving on the front lines and on the ships and things of that nature, the U.S. victory is very closely tied to the U.S.'s ability to manufacture, and we out manufactured many, all the other countries, and that gave us a strong edge, um, in moving forward. And so we saw, at that time, we took huge leaps in terms of the manufacturing processes, whether we were looking at, large automobile manufacturers that were being retooled to make, whether they went from making Cadillacs or Ford, they started making Jeeps and planes and things of that nature. Prefab ship construction, modular construction of airplanes, all of these concepts, many of which are driven by Henry Ford. I mean, so I really enjoyed that aspect of, in the manufacturing world. And we think even post World War II, we had going kind of tying into the lean aspect, is Taiichi Ono was over in the US, and he's credited for creating many of the lean manufacturing methodologies. There's been numerous books written about him. I think they're all very good. And so he was over in the US learning some manufacturing techniques on how to improve, rebuild their country following World War II. And one of the things which I think is fairly interesting is the fact that, Taiichi Ono was he kind of marveled, and he actually drew a lot of inspiration from how US supermarkets operated. And, so he was getting some ideas about how, it was surprising to him how folks could walk into a store and basically pick their own products up and walk through a store and then go and get checked out, and which was very different than the way things were done in Japan. And so he utilized a lot of that mentality when he was creating his systems of replenishment. And, the other piece that's interesting, something we got in the South, is, Piggly Wiggly, which is the supermarket that is credited
Yeah.
for kind of generating the modern supermarket. And they were originally based in Memphis, Tennessee. And so that's kind of, it's an interesting legacy through that whole process. So I enjoy learning those types of things, and just the challenges that manufacturing brings to us all. So,
Well, I could go a lot of ways with that. There were several things that I did not expect in your intro. But first, I want to say I love the American Made sign in the background. Definitely, we take pride at Polo Custom Products in the products that we make for firefighters, first responders, for our war fighters. And so we make a lot of those there in Louisville. And so definitely take a lot of pride in that. Appreciate the history of manufacturing there. That's fascinating. And I, pick up on those things like with World War II and the manufacturing base that we had at that time, and how we were really supplying the world that was at war with what was needed. And so really important points that you brought up. And really the third important point that you brought up is Piggly Wiggly and and its location, close to our plant, because that is something we always encourage our customers to take a tour. And what we haven't encouraged on the podcast yet is to get some banana pudding from Piggly Wiggly in Louisville, Mississippi, because we have brought that out for customers and it is delightful. So, so all really high notes you hit there in the intro, Tim, and we're excited to have you on. Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I know you did some exercises with your team early on, and our sales team is even going to, collaborate with you to learn more about, some of the timeless lessons learned from Toyota's manufacturing system, and what is it from their principles that you and your team have been discussing at Polo?
One of the things, I guess, is that.
But before we get into that, this podcast is brought to you by Polo Custom Products. We are a custom manufacturer that specializes in sewing, sealing, and thermoforming. We work with project engineers, sourcing professionals, and buyers to design, engineer, and manufacture products that cannot afford to fail. If you're interested in working with us, visit our website at www.polocustomproducts.com and fill out a request for quote form. Now, back to the show.
There's always opportunities for improvement. Whether that improvement is reflected in the safety of the product, the quality of it, the cost, or the productivity of the process, which yields you a better delivery. And that's regardless of whether that's a manufacturing process or a sales process. The system, as it's presented, has an application in every single thing that we do. If we bring a team together with a clear understanding of what the current state is, how things are today, and we ask questions about the process, we're able to identify those opportunities and employ countermeasures that can improve the process near term, short term, midterm, long term. And when you begin to visualize, and that's a lot of what the Toyota production system wants you to do, is visualize the process and share with all the stakeholders the things that have been found so that everybody can participate in creating those countermeasures. And a lot of those things are eye-opening. And for instance, I was at a facility in White House, Tennessee, years ago, and we were making gauge equipment, which, so it's making no-go gauges, no-go gauges. So very, very tight tolerances. We were measuring product out, out to the millionth of an inch or something of that nature. It was highly critical. And as part of their quality process, you were not allowed to have parts touch. And one of the things that we were doing, as we were walking through the value stream, you saw where, when they picked the order, they would actually stage all the pieces in these little slots so that nothing rolled around, nothing banged together. And we followed that out to the very first operation. The operator took that and dumped it out. And it was like, hold on, what about, nothing touching? He says, well, it doesn't make any difference at this point because this is a centerless grind operation. I'm grinding all of that off. So for years, they've been going through this process that nobody had connected those dots and said, well, we're wasting time at this point. And so those are the things that, again, I can't be surprised when we find those things because I've seen it too many times already. And, so those types of opportunities exist, again, in every process, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's administrative, HR function, it really doesn't make much difference. There's those opportunities. We just have to get teams together, get the stakeholders involved and visualize, create, draw out a big map sometimes, but it's amazing what you can see.
Yeah, we actually went through a process improvement and we talked about lean office principles and I guess not a planned but selfish question. When you find that gap, how do you get everybody on board with it? And how do you get them A, to buy in, and then B, to train, and then 3, make sure that it's happening and there's accountability there?
Well, a lot of it, and one of the things, that I think about is you have to get the team, everybody has to have some level of training where you start speaking the same language and everybody has the ability to recognize something as an issue. And, when you create examples of why do we want to do things this way, and in the lean world, I usually reference a lot of things around the kitchen. Why is your dishwasher located right next to the sink? Why don't you buy, a refrigerator that's big enough to hold a year's worth? Because, when we think about inventory and things of that nature, that's something that people can relate to. And, when we want to go, we think about, we do our grocery shopping and things of that nature, typically kind of on demand, right? And that's what a lot of the Toyota production system is based on, is having things on demand, what you need, when you need it, in the amount that you need, delivered, with quality, on time, every time. And yeah, so it's, again, the applications are everywhere. And if you get that team and bring them together with that mindset, just having an open mind, you can do great things. And I've seen folks that come in with, really bad attitudes and have converted, so to speak, over the course of the week. And, rarely have I seen attitudes stay bad throughout the process if you have a good team.
That's a great analogy with the kitchen. That's relatable to anybody. And I'm thinking about what I have in what drawers right now. So very, very thought provoking. And since we're on the kitchen theme, that transitions well into the spaghetti diagram analysis that you've also applied to manufacturing. Can you talk about that process? And it goes along with what we're talking about already, but identifying opportunities for efficiencies.
Yeah, and again, it does kind of segue quite well. So, the spaghetti diagram, what we want to do is kind of draw out a physical layout, just on a little piece of grid sheet, as much as possible, draw that to scale. It's probably not the most important aspect of it. And then, trace the path. And in the manufacturing world, what we want to do is trace the path of the product going through the process, as well as trace the path of the team members that are involved in the process. And typically what we're going to do is look for the opportunities where those paths are crossing or going back and forth. Is it going from, A to B, back to A, then to C? Because if we think about it, what's going on at A, because it's potentially a bottleneck for us. And so those are the things that we want to look at. And again, if you think about, the spaghetti diagram of the kitchen, that's going to tell you what your layout of the house, your kitchen's going to look like, is where you're moving, where your plates, where the food's moving, and gives you the opportunity to implement some, changes in your kitchen layout.
Well, and when it comes to custom manufacturing and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of units, those little changes make a really big difference.
That is correct.
Is exciting stuff to talk about. Now, you've been with us for less than a year. What are your first impressions of Polo and Louisville's plant operations and our capabilities?
And I don't know if you're familiar, but besides having a Toyota production system, there's also a Toyota sewing system, right? And so it is dedicated, obviously, to the sewing industry. And there's a few things that are kind of critical components. And one of those is having, highly skilled operators, having the right mix of machines and flexibility within both of those things between the operators and the equipment. And I would suggest to you my initial impression is, our Louisville operation is rich in all three of those categories. And so having those three gives us so many great opportunities for success and take on challenging projects to be able to move forward in those. And, again, I would suggest that, previous role that I had where the entire shop was kind of set up in a traditional setup where, operators were running a single machine and that machine was in with other machines of the same thing. And when we looked at, our spaghetti diagram, you saw things just going back and forth, in and out of a single needle operation, for instance. And when you set things up in a cell and you've got a good flow through there, you may be setting something up where you're going to do a single needle surge operation, then come back to another single needle, maybe a double needle operation. So you're moving it through. And so instead of having those departmentalized or silos, you've got a nice consistent flow of your product. And the goal would be to move those things one piece at a time. We're not always there, but it's nice to move product one piece at a time. You get a quality check, as the product's going through the cell, things of that nature. And I certainly owe a debt of gratitude to my predecessor, Greg Brown, having just retired after 14 years for, setting us up for continued success. Because it can take a long time to convert a plant over. I've done it. It takes about 3 years to get the mindset, get the machines, and get all the cross training needed to get those things established.
Yeah, I was going to mention that you do have big shoes to fill there with taking the spot of Greg Brown, but we're definitely excited that you are in the seat. And we look forward to all the improvements that you're going to bring to Louisville, and know we've got just such a great team down there that you got, a chance to build on. And I think about even, something I say a lot at Polo is we're a 78-year-old company, and I get to come in and basically stand on the shoulders of giants of those that came before me and built such a great foundation in business that people have counted on and worked for many years. What would your advice be? And this is the last question we have time for, but what would your advice be to somebody who is interested in a career in manufacturing?
Yeah, I would suggest careers they're underrated. Certainly at times there's a lot of stress and pressure, but I think that comes with any career choice.
Sure.
And the thing that people, I get a lot of satisfaction whether or not you're taking something from a piece of wood, a lump of clay, a piece of steel, aluminum, raw goods, and converting that something to a saleable item. And, you think about, all the different various roles of material and things that come together to build a pair of, potentially life-saving chainsaw shafts. And that brings a level of satisfaction to anybody. And certainly, I've got a son who's a first responder. He's a police officer, a young police officer. And, he's the first guy to respond to anything, so he's getting there, to a scene ahead of the fire department. He's getting there ahead of the ambulance in many cases, and what little he's got on his person in terms of his uniform or in his vehicle, that's everything he's got that he is depending on, and potentially, somebody he's going to assist, they may be depending on that as well. And so, I think it's certainly important to me, and I think I've seen it really strong in the culture here. It's something that the team here, as well as the other Polo locations, take a lot of pride in. So the manufacturing, again, it's a little bit personal for me. It's challenging, and there's a lot of days where you might think about it a little, think about it twice, but. One of my favorite sayings, and I'm going to circle a little bit back to Little World War II, is, George Patton, one of his quotes was, a good plan today, if I'm going to say this right, a good plan violently executed today is better than the perfect plan next week. And, so that's often how we have to roll in the manufacturing world. We maybe don't have the perfect information, the perfect machine to make the perfect decision, but we do what we need to do to get the job done, get it done safely, make a quality product. And so again, there's a lot of satisfaction in that. The other quote that I would tell you is the, good old Clint Eastwood Gunny Highway quote: "We improvise, we adapt, we overcome." And those are the things, any career you get challenged, that we just have to rely on the strengths of each other, and so that we can forge on.
Great quotes, great points, and definitely hit the nail on the head with career in manufacturing. It's a lot of shifting priorities and shifting situations in the world, maybe more so than ever these days, but definitely rewarding at the end of the day when we're making products that save lives, keep people safe, and people depend on. And some of them you don't want to ever see them in your lifetime, but you're glad they're there if if you need them, especially in the medical space. But But Tim, I really appreciate your time today.
Yes, sir.
We could easily do a round two, and we're really glad you're on the Polo team.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Looking forward to talking again and getting down there and getting some banana pudding one of these days.
There you go. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, Tim.